I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're speaking with a terrific author. His name is Zebulon Miller, and he is bringing forth a heartfelt memoir. It is called Crystal and Cocktails, Anatomy of an Addict. His account is not just about the horrors of addiction, but a deep dive into the intricate nature of recovery. He sheds light on a crucial message that not all addicts fit into the same stereotypical portrayal. Many are living among us and struggling silently. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank our team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support writers like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing this very powerful book. Zeb, thanks so much for being our guest today on Spotlight.
Thank you.
You know, when people think of an addict, they think of like the old movie Lost Weekend, where the guy can't function, where he's hanging onto walls, where he's seeing pink elephants and having, you know, for some people it is like that.
Oh,
you know?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's total, but a lot of people are completely functional, but still alcoholics, or drug addicts, or whatever the case might be. Don't you think?
Oh, yeah. That's absolutely true. Most people are like that. Yeah. And it's typically because usually the last two things to go, or the last thing that you would call that, you know, makes somebody like a functional member of society or whatever, is their job.
Yeah.
Most people can find a way to hold on to their job until the very, very, very end, because the job gives you money, and money is what you need to be able to get whatever it is that you're addicted to. So yeah, you know,
Exactly.
typically people will be functional enough, they'll lose family, friends, and everything else, but they'll hold on to that job until the bitter end. Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely.
That's the final straw that breaks a camel's back. You know, you lose your friends, you lose your wife, you lose your husband. You hang on to that job with all your might because, like you said, that's what sustains your habit and also keeps you functioning within society, keeping a roof over your head. Tell us a little bit about why you decided to write this powerful book.
So just to expand on what's in that short description that's on the back of the book there, I was always fascinated with reading when I was a kid. I mean, I think I was a pretty smart kid. I taught myself to read before kindergarten. I used to sit. My dad used to sit in his chair and read these leather-bound Lewis L'Amour novels. You know, he had this like membership where he'd get these in the mail, and I would sit there and kind of read over his shoulder and try to see how far down a page I could get before he'd flip the page. And so I started reading at a really young age, and I was fascinated with just with storytelling. I really liked, the thing I like about reading is that you can kind of give people an indication of the story you're trying to tell, and then they can use their imagination to kind of create the story so that it fits in their mind and everything. That was really fascinating to me. But what I found when I finally started trying to write a book is it's got to be a topic or a subject that I was really passionate about, because there's from the time that I seriously started writing the book until I finished, it was about a 10-year period, which from what I understand is about right for a first-time author. And it has to be a subject that you're passionate about, because you have to be able to get through all those periods of negative self-talk when you know, why am I spending so much time on this, and nobody's going to read this, and you know, it's a waste. And so when I was in rehab, one of my counselors had told me that, she said there was a lot of books about addiction, and I read 4 or 5 of them when in the process of writing my book as well. And she said there's a lot of books about addiction, but there's not a lot of books that talk about recovery. And if you could put together a book that speaks in length about the recovery process as well, that's something that the world really needs. And then it was shortly after, about 2 years into recovery when someone close to me had told me, they said that you've been able to help yourself, and that's good, but good people help themselves and great people help other people. So if you could find a way that you could tell your story, and if that story could help people, that would be great. And so that was a big part of the motivation. Was I just know, I still remember, it's still super fresh and probably always will be, just how desperate and miserable and lonely and helpless I was. And if I can help anybody avoid going to all those dark places that I did, then I think that that would be really special.
Now, the misery you talk about is during the addiction or during the recovery or during both?
It's mostly during the addiction, just because it's so helpless for, and I'm sure it varies a little bit for everybody, but at the same time, having been around, going through 12-step programs and tons of therapy and being in rehab and all that kind of stuff, you realize that there are nuances to my story that are different, but in general, the general story is pretty much the same for everyone. And it's good, because if there's a lot of similarities, then it means that there's a lot of solutions that work for one people will probably work for a lot of other people as well. But it's I got caught in this just terrible cycle of that, like, I couldn't handle the world sober. And so I had to be under the influence of something just so I could function in the world. But substances work for a little while, and then all of a sudden they don't. And when they stop working, especially with there are certain ones are worse than others, but when you get caught in this cycle of, it's a 24-hour cycle of coming up and then going down. And when you're going down, you feel terrible, and the only thing you want is to get more of whatever that substance was, just so that you feel normal and you don't feel terrible again. And I would get in these moments of panic where it's like, oh man, where is this next thing going to come from? And I'm not sure if I can get any more. And it's terrible when my entire life is centered around this one thing. And it's really hard to accomplish anything. It was really hard to accomplish anything else in my life when that was like my sole focus, the only thing that I really cared about, but at the same time, it was kind of an interesting, it was almost, I don't know what the right word is. I don't want to say refreshing, but life is really easy when I was really deep in addiction, because my only goal when I woke up was to not lose my job and to get more of whatever it was. And that was it. So life was very simple. There was no responsibilities. I didn't have to worry about relationships or anything. And that's the piece that completely changed when I went into recovery. So there's challenges in recovery, but they're completely different.
Yeah. I mean, Rob Lowe is a recovering alcoholic. I listen to his podcast a lot. And he talks about the fact that getting high, getting stoned, and drinking are fun. I mean, that's the thing. And that's what keeps you in the game. You do feel good when you're in it, even if you are destroying your life simultaneously. So it's hard for people to become sober because they're used to drinking, after work, maybe before work, at Christmas. And they're basically, like you described, self-medicating. There's something bothering them. There's an internal sadness or a anxiety or a depression that they're battling and they're treating. So how does recovery help turn this all around? Do you still miss that high that you used to get? I know I've stopped drinking a few years ago, and I miss having a drink every now and then. What can you do?
My recovery is a little it's a little complicated, not really, but it was a little complicated because there was a lot of things that I had to address. And so it probably took maybe 2 or 3 years roughly. It was really hard when I first got out of rehab. So I got out of rehab December 16th is when I got out of rehab. And then I immediately went to my parents' house for Christmas. you
Mm.
know, whatever that would be, 10 days later, right? Or
Yeah.
not 9 days later. And for the longest time, I associated trips to my parents' house with stealing pills. And that was it. And that was all I thought about the entire ride out there. And
Mm.
so I was just in this panic. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh man, 9 days out of rehab, and I got to go to my parents' house, and I got to try to make this happen. And uh,
Right.
it was terrible. I had like a panic attack. I almost passed out. There was like this ringing in my ears when I'm sitting in the room with my family. I'm sure people were uncomfortable, but like I had to go outside and I had to call somebody because I was in such a panic and talk to them, and it kind of calmed me down and sort of refocus and recenter or whatever. But um it uh it's it got easier. It definitely got easier. It
Did you
really
get
helped
through
that.
that day? Did you get through that Christmas
Oh, I
celebration?
did. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And then
Okay.
it also really helped that my wife made sure that she cleaned out the house of like everything. I
Right.
never really considered myself to be an alcoholic, but she cleaned all the alcohol out of the house and
Right.
made sure that the house was clear of everything before I got back, which really helped. But it was probably 2 or 3 years before I really got to a point where I didn't feel like that I was craving anything anymore.
Right. Right.
And then long term, as far as recovery goes, because I have I have an autoimmune disorder. It's called ankylosing spondylitis,
Mhm.
and so it causes inflammation in the tissue in my spine, and then my body thinks it's diseased tissue, so it attacks itself.
Right.
And I'm like an inch and a half shorter now than I was
Mm.
15 years ago because my spine's like kind of slowly collapsing, and
Uh,
it causes a lot of pain. It causes daily chronic pain. It's the thing that wakes me up in the morning, and it's the reason that I can't wait to go to bed at night because
Right.
I can escape from it for several hours. And
And you're
um,
probably in a position where you can't take painkillers as a recovering addict, right?
yeah, so I take it's called tramadol is what
Mhm.
I take. So it's a real low grade, and then I'm on an extended release, and it actually works really well because it's very low. It's a very low dose, and because
Is
it's
it an
extended
opioid
release,
also?
it's a synthetic opioid, yeah.
Synthetic. Okay.
So it doesn't your standard opiates break down to morphine in your system, I believe,
Mhm.
and then this is synthetic, so it doesn't break down to morphine. It just breaks down to a different form of tramadol, but it helps with the pain. It helps a lot. My physical activity, regular physical activity, helps a lot too,
Yeah.
but that was a little bit of a challenge as well because I was just caught in this weird kind of catch-22 where I because I know what I was like without it, and I was in so much pain that I had about 4 good hours in the morning, and then I would spend the rest of the day just propped up in pillows in bed, just because I couldn't walk for more than maybe 10 or 15 minutes at a time, and
Wow.
it was really bad. And so it took a lot of kind of introspection and soul searching, and I eventually got to this point where I consider everything that I put in my body, no matter what it is. And then I think that everything that I put in my body has to have a purpose. So it has to be for something, even if it's just food. If it's food, then I mean, obviously, food
Right.
sustains you. I used to drink a lot of energy drinks, and I stopped. I drink a lot more water now just because I think
Right.
of the purpose for all those things. And when I really kind of, that kind of analytical sort of right brained perspective on recovery and thinking about the things I put in my body, then it helped. It took a little while to really be comfortable with it, but I really feel now that just having that perspective of it has to have a purpose, and the purpose can't be a coping mechanism.
Absolutely. It's great
And it
advice. Everything
right.
we put into our bodies is a substance of
Mhm.
some
Right.
form, whether it is whether it's sugar, a
Mhm.
carbohydrate, or getting our little rushes from our morning coffee. You
Mhm.
do have to be careful what you fuel this engine with.
Exactly.
Zebulon Miller has written a wonderful memoir. It is a book that will shed light on his situation, but probably shed some light on your situation too,
Mhm.
whether it's you or somebody around you. The name of the book is Crystals and Cocktails: Anatomy of an Addict. It is about the horrors of addiction, but also takes a deep dive into the nature rather of recovery. Zeb, thanks so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you.
My pleasure. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.